So this video is a part one to a big topic, suffering, and it explains the origins of suffering and the original sin. In the beginning, the world was not meant to be broken. According to the Bible, creation began in harmony between God, humanity, and nature itself. There was no death, there was no suffering, and no natural disasters, and no pain. So then how did suffering enter the world? To truly understand this, we must go back to Genesis, which is the first book in the Bible for those of you that didn't know. And in Genesis, in chapter 1, verse 31, it says, "And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good." God essentially created this earth, and when he looked upon it, he looked at a perfect world. Everything was good. There was no suffering. There was no pain in the beginning. Human beings were born with free will to make their own choices, and they were created to trust God and live according to his wisdom. One command symbolized this trust, and they were told to not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. In Genesis chapter 3, temptation enters. Adam and Eve choose to disobey God's command, believing they could define good and evil for themselves. And it says in chapter 3, verses 6, "So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desirable to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. She also gave to her husband with her, and he ate." This act is what Christians call the original sin. If you've ever heard that being thrown about, this is it. A rejection of God's authority and trust over mankind. This original sin immediately brings separation. Adam and Eve feel shame, fear, and hid from God because they now know the knowledge of good and evil. They are fearful for what they have done. They shouldn't feel this way had they not eaten from the tree, because God didn't want them to have this knowledge of fear and being scared. Their relationship was then therefore fractured with him. It says in Genesis chapter 3, verses 17, "Cursed is the ground for your sake. In toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life." Not only is humanity cursed because of this sin, the ground of the earth is cursed. So now creation that God made good in the start is now cursed. And because sin broke humanity's relationship with God, we now have this disrupted order of creation. Pain, death, toil, and disorder now enter the earth. And so now we have this human suffering existing, this being violence, injustice to one another, and selfishness. But we also have natural suffering in the earth and the world. This can be disease, decay, and natural disasters, which we hear about on the news all the time. We have this natural suffering because sin introduced suffering and corruption into the entire world, and not just our human hearts. We see this pain and suffering continue into Romans chapter 8, verses 20 to 22. It says, "For the creation was made subject to vanity," which just means subject to frustration. "The whole creation has been groaning, as in the pains of childbirth." Because the earth has been subject to vanity, it's been subject to frustration and pain, the world can no longer function as it was supposed and originally made to do. Natural disasters, decay, and suffering are signs of a world no longer as it was intended to be. So to put it simply, it is not looking good. But the Bible does not end with suffering. If we skip to Romans, it points to hope that creation will one day be restored. In that verse I've just read you, it said the groaning. This is not the groaning of a dying world. This is the groaning of a pregnant one. The childbirth pains implies that the world is pregnant. It is implying that the suffering that we are enduring has purpose, pain that leads to new life, something new, something greater than what we have now. This would imply that something is coming and not ending. And so Christian belief is that God has not abandoned the world that he made. The story of Scripture moves towards restoration, healing, and redemption for the world. So if you are suffering right now and going through pains, as we all do, just know that it is not the Creator's fault. It is not God's fault you are going through these pains, but rather the fall of humanity. I hope this video helped, As I did say at the beginning, this is a part 1 to the topic of suffering. And in the next videos, I'm going to discuss the benefits and what can come out of suffering. I hope this was useful, and stick around to see the next one. Goodbye.